Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are completely moving past the theory and breaking down exactly how to execute early intervention out there in the real world. Think of this as your structured, practical blueprint. We're going to dive right into the tactical decisions practitioners face every single day, from building out a professional team all the way to picking the absolute best delivery environment for a child who really needs it. So if you've ever wondered how these services actually get organized, scaled, and delivered to make a massive impact, well, you are in the exact right place. Let's get started. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. What is early intervention? 2. Who needs early intervention? 3. The 3 team approaches. 4. Choosing the right setting. And finally, 5. The impact of early action. Let's jump right into part 1. What is early intervention? Defining the core process. To really kick things off on the right foot, we have to understand the sheer magnitude of the challenge practitioners are facing, because honestly, that directly dictates how we structure everything. The stakes here are incredibly high. The data shows that 1 in every 100 children aged 0 to 6 suffers from some type of disability. To put that into perspective using census data, that's over 20.42 lakh children who need immediate support. And what's absolutely crucial to grasp from an execution standpoint is that these numbers, they're only going up. Because the need is so massive, and with a growing recognition of disabilities across 21 different categories, our approach literally has to be highly scalable, super organized, and ready to be deployed rapidly across all kinds of different populations. So what is it? At its core, early intervention is a process of integrated services. It facilitates a child's age-related growth and helps out families during those vital initial years of development, specifically from 0 to 6 years old. But I really want to unpack that phrase for a second, integrated services. In practice, this means we are intentionally moving away from disjointed care. You know, the old way, where a child might see a speech therapist on Monday, a physical therapist on Thursday, and neither of those professionals actually talked to the other. Instead, true execution requires a targeted, unified support system. It's really about stepping in during that foundational development window to bridge the gap for kids who are experiencing delayed milestones, all through one incredibly cohesive strategy. All right, moving on to part 2. Who needs early intervention? Identifying the risk factors. Figuring out exactly who needs these services early on is the first real tactical step for any practitioner. When we evaluate who needs help, we basically group the candidates into 3 main buckets based on risk factors, and our strategy shifts in a big way depending on which category we're dealing with. First up, we have biological realities. We're talking infants with low birth weight, prematurity, or maybe birth injuries. This usually means they need highly specialized medical therapy and really close physical monitoring. Then, second, we look at developmental disabilities. This covers conditions like cerebral palsy, autism, and sensory impairments. These demand a much more long-term, specialized therapeutic framework. And finally, the third bucket, environmental risks. If a child is facing poor nutrition, severe socioeconomic hurdles, or honestly just a lack of cognitive stimulation, they are also at high risk. In these cases, the approach pivots heavily toward parental education, connecting the family with resources, and modifying the child's daily environment to spark that necessary stimulation. And that brings up a really crucial point about serving these populations. The entire process has to be intensely parent-centric. We have to treat the family as vital, equal partners. Professionals don't just treat a child behind closed doors. They optimize the parent's role by actively demonstrating therapies and doing direct counseling sessions. Because the ultimate goal is to make sure the intervention doesn't just happen during a 45-minute clinic visit, but continues seamlessly at home, woven right into the family's daily routine. Which leads us nicely into part 3. The 3 team approaches, or basically, how these professionals actually collaborate. When you're building an intervention framework, there are 3 distinct tiers of service delivery: multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. Picking the right approach is a massive operational decision, and it heavily depends on the resources you have and what the child specifically needs. Now, while the highly synergistic transdisciplinary model is pretty much the ultimate goal we all aim for, sometimes a multidisciplinary approach is the only feasible starting point, especially in resource-constrained or highly rural areas where professionals kind of have to operate more independently. It's truly fascinating to map out how this service delivery actually evolves. It starts with the multidisciplinary setup. This is where a pediatrician, a speech therapist, and a physiotherapist might all evaluate the child independently. Everyone is basically working in parallel silos, so cross-communication is quite low. But as things evolve, you move to the interdisciplinary approach. Here, professionals start actively collaborating, they're sharing information and making joint decisions. But the absolute peak of modern execution? That's the transdisciplinary approach. In this model, those traditional boundaries just blur. Professionals actively cross-train, they share skills, and they often empower one single primary service provider to carry out a fully unified, integrated plan right alongside the family. It's a total game changer because it minimizes overwhelming the parents with a dozen different specialists, and it really is a masterclass in high-synergy collaboration. Let's head into part 4, choosing the right setting. We know how they collaborate, but where does the intervention actually happen? Once your team approach is locked in, you've got to make another critical operational choice: the physical environment. This is a tactical decision made directly with the family, and you really have to weigh the pros and cons based on their daily reality. For instance, if a family has an amazing support system but maybe a tight budget, a home-based program is a super logical choice. It's very cost-effective and heavily empowers parents in a familiar setting. But the downside is it completely lacks peer socialization. On the flip side, if a child desperately needs peer modeling or requires highly specialized assistive devices, a center-based program is required. But practitioners have to factor in the heavy logistical burdens this puts on a family: higher costs, specialized transportation needs, and taking significant time off work. Luckily, execution doesn't always have to be this strict either-or choice. We also have mixed interventions, which offer a really beautifully balanced middle ground. It essentially combines both home and center-based strategies. In the real world, this might look like a family executing daily, parent-led therapeutic exercises at home, but then making bi-weekly visits to a specialized center for advanced care. It's honestly an ideal logistical setup for urban families or remote families who can travel periodically, or for multiply disabled infants, like those with convulsive disorders, who absolutely need specific paramedical support that a home visitor just can't safely offer in a living room. And finally, part 5, the impact of early action, reducing the disability burden. So why do we put so much energy into structuring this exact process? Well, because the real-world results of getting it right are literally life-altering. Providing well-structured, timely intervention during that magical 0 to 6 age bracket capitalizes on the period of maximum brain development. And it doesn't just manage the primary condition, it is fundamentally preventative. By acting early, practitioners actively prevent or minimize the impact of secondary handicaps. For instance, making sure a child with a primary physical delay doesn't also develop severe social or communicative delays just from being isolated. Plus, it wraps the entire family in crucial psychosocial support, which ultimately decreases the long-term economic burden by paving the way for these kids to lead a highly independent, productive lives. We've covered a lot of ground today on this tactical roadmap. We know exactly how to evaluate the risks, we understand the incredible operational power of unified team approaches, and we know how to strategically optimize the delivery settings based on a family's reality. We essentially have the complete, step-by-step framework to execute these vital services on the ground, which just leaves us with one final, very urgent question to ponder. With all these tools and knowledge ready to go, are we truly ready to step up, catch them young, and rewrite their futures? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.